Trump to be criminally charged within a month, says former U.S. Attorney Preet Bharara. Wow. Noel Casler, your thoughts?
That's impressive because Preet knows what he speaks.
Yeah.
So that is probably based on some inside knowledge. That's very impressive.
Yeah. Interesting. I know. I mean, it's all a guessing game at this point, right? We were saying, I guess, after the midterms, then after the runoff in Georgia. I mean, seems to me it's like it's indictment season.
It absolutely is, and we're in that window that they have to do it, right? Mm-hmm. You get any closer to the next presidential election, and you know, we get into that whole quagmire. So I think if they're going to move, they're going to do it this winter.
Yeah. By the way, you had some great points about the Walker campaign. You said if losing doesn't make Herschel Walker unpopular with the GOP, conceding like a gentleman certainly will. That was the thing we were most startled by. We were like, he conceded right away? It's like, where was that Herschel? Yeah. Like he even seemed coherent, didn't he?
Absolutely. If that guy had showed up on the campaign trail, it might have been, you know, even closer than it was. I think we saw closer to who Herschel really is. Honestly, that was the kind of guy we saw behind the scenes on Celebrity Apprentice. A lot of his insanity, you know, was being fed to him, right? He didn't have the aptitude to really speak on these issues, so they tried to give him these talking points, and I think he would just mangle them in his brain and start talking about vampires. But essentially, his humanity came out there a little bit, and Republicans don't want that, right? Because it's not good for the grift. You know?
Yeah. Well, you said Trump did, in fact, fundraise off the Walker campaign and keep the money for himself. Classic Trump. What a bunch of chodes the GOP are, just spineless men and women. And also, has there ever been a more amoral block of voters than rural white voters? You said the GOP's only plan was voter suppression. They barely even let the man talk. This wasn't about issues. It was about aiming as low as possible and hoping ignorant rubes wouldn't notice the grift. Disgusting. I mean, it really was. It was just such a human prop thing.
Yeah, it was disheartening. And, you know, I grew up around black excellence. I grew up in PG County, Maryland in the 70s and early 80s. I was educated by, you know, brilliant black teachers. A lot of people were going to graduate school at the University of Maryland. You know, I grew up in the shadow of that. And if you're somebody who cares about that and you understand and appreciate the contributions, you know, that black Americans have given to intellectual thought, to science, to the arts, to the humanities, and you throw up a caricature, you know, like Herschel Walker, the worst kind of idea of like a dumb athlete, you know, an unstable, violent guy. It shouldn't have just been like deeply embarrassing to African-American community, which it was, and they spoke on. Anybody who cares about progress and putting the best foot forward should have been like, this is a moment beyond the pale. And the fact that their strategy was not just buffoonery, right, and stereotypes, it was voter suppression, which still exists. Brian Kemp did that, you know.
Oh, the whole thing was with the white handlers, and, you know, as somebody's tweeted, they said, my racist uncles love this. You know, Frangela was talking about, you know, the absent father. Mm-hmm. The right wing loved, you know, having this caricature to you know, to talk about. And it's just, as someone said, it was like a dumpster fire rolled into a train wreck that fell into an orphanage and then an animal shelter that you had to just watch through your hand until it was over.
Yeah, that's well said. And you know what I think the end game was there? Georgia's one of the few states where the governor gets to pick the senator if they have to resign. That's how we got Kelly Loeffler, right? Yeah. So I think the end game was they would have put Herschel in the Senate had they won, and a couple months into it, they would have said, hey, we got this other dossier. We found 10 more kids that you fathered. You got to step aside now and let us replace you. Yeah. You know, they would have blackmailed Herschel himself, and then Governor Kemp would have given the seat back to Perdue or Loeffler or somebody like that.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah, exactly. Let's talk Musk. You tweeted Elon Musk should become a pariah, and everyone should do all they can to boycott any product he sells, including U.S. government support for SpaceX. He is not fit to shine Dr. Fauci's shoes. I mean, the fact that, you know, he's talking about prosecuting Fauci, first of all, you know, in a slam against pronouns and trans people, and secondly, just this idiocy of prosecuting a doctor who has dedicated his life to you know, keeping Americans alive is just. I kept thinking, oh, there's no other line that Elon Musk will cross, and here it is, right?
It's beyond the pale, you know. And over 1 million Americans have died from. We're not out of it yet. So to make light of it, to use the slur against the, you know, trans community, and to sort of like spit in the face of that kind of service. You know, I went to NIH 17 years ago. My life was saved at NIH, National Institutes of Health, of which Fauci was the head. I was down there for a month. I was there for rehab, like substance abuse stuff, but I participated in a protocol, and I saw children. The pediatric oncology ward was near me. I saw what these families were going through, what these doctors were going through. You know, it's research science. This is where they broke the genetic code. It's where they developed AZT. It's about saving lives. And this guy who's only taking and not giving, you know, who's got everything in the world, and he continues to sort of hurt and maliciously slam people, is just beyond the pale.
Yeah. By the way, because you've spoken before of, you know, substance abuse, can you tell me why? Is it just a media failing again that we just don't talk about Trump Sr. and Jr.'s obvious drug problems?
Yeah, I'd love to speak on that, because it's codependency, right? Addiction is a family disease. That's what you learn when you get into, you know, recovery. People go to Al-Anon. It affects the whole family, and people don't like to talk about it. We're not comfortable as a nation addressing it as the medical issue it is. It's a disease, right? It's not a lifestyle choice. It's a disease. It's like diabetes or something else. Recovery from it depends on your behavior, right? But we don't like to talk about that stuff. Trump was obviously addicted. The reason I pointed it out was not so much that he even did the substances, right? I worked with rock bands. If you can do the drugs and finish the gig, more power to you. You know what I mean? I was a road manager for Crosby, Stills, and Nash. Like, I'm used to 70-year-olds at Little Toke before the show, right? What I tried to point out with Trump was the isms underneath addiction, the self-centered fear, the resentment, the paranoia, the thinking only of yourself. That is very dangerous in a leadership position, right? Because it's an unhealthy person, right? And that's what I was trying to show people and get them to talk about with Trump. Media wouldn't touch it. You know, I sat down with Carl Bernstein, who's an old friend of mine. I've known Carl for a long time. And we tried to make the story, you know, so we could run with it with three sources. There was myself, another person in production who was willing to go on the record, and then it came down to his doctor, Dr. Bornstein, who was his Dr. Feelgood on the Upper East Side, who mysteriously died in January 2020, just found dead in his house, right? Very convenient. But Carl said, that's the key to the story. Without the medical records, we can't prove this. And Trump himself sent his bodyguards to steal those medical records in February of 17. So to answer your question, I know it was long-winded, we don't talk about it because we're uncomfortable. And network executives fear their lawyers. They fear jumping into that quagmire. So it's easier to pretend like it doesn't exist.
But it's just Don Jr. talking about Hunter Biden's drug stuff makes I'm like, you're obviously coked to the gills. You're like slits. And we're just supposed to ignore the hypocrisy?
Right. And in a relapse, Don Jr. was dry. When I worked with a couple of Trump's kids have addiction issues, no shame in it, but they were all dry when I was around them. Right. So Don relapsed early into his dad's, you know, tenure, and it's a public relapse. And it shows you the character of that family, that his sister, you know, or his mom, or his mom's dead now, but somebody doesn't say, hey, dude, stop with the videos every night. Yeah. You know what I mean? We're going to send you to Betty Ford, or just go live in a cabin somewhere and snort to your heart's content, but get off TikTok, you know?
By the way, we have 1 degree of Stephen Stills separation, because I'm friends with Stephen, and I just want to say I was a different era, because the only Coke he had was the actual liquid. I remember my friend Trish going into the store to get the right kind of Coke, but it was like he wanted the classic and not the right. Exactly. So I was in a different era of Crosby Stills. His only addiction was the classic.
Exactly. I lived on a tour bus with Stephen for about 4 years of my life. And that was my job, getting the little Coke bottles in the glass. And they were like gold to me. You know, I'd be slipping somebody a 50 in Houston to fill up the bus refrigerator with them and stuff, you know.
My friend Trish became a roadie. I'm like, go to the store and I don't keep soda here. Get the right kind of Coke for Stephen Stills. Yep, not that hilarious.
Kind. Yeah. Stephen played over the weekend in San Francisco. Just to give a shout out to Stephen, he joined Jim Irsay on stage and Kenny Wayne Shepherd. I was happy to see it. I love Stephen.
A genius. Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah, I got to. When he had a new album out, he invited us over, and he grabbed a guitar off the wall and started playing with it. And I looked at my friend, I was like, these are really good seats for a Crosby Stills concert.
That's hilarious.
2 feet away. It was fantastic.